have to you have to like to travel, probably stay in 4 or 5 star hotels continuously. You like to have to you have to like to get days off, meaning you can play golf or tennis or pickleball or something like that. You don't have to spend hours in the gym, but you don't have to. And so Bob has done very well with that list of qualifications. I met him, I guess it's probably, we're talking this morning, maybe 20 to 25 years ago. Dwight Hawksworth had a group of people that got together for breakfast over at Hickory House. And Bob was one of that group. And it was, Dwight's idea was people that are not connected in their daily jobs. He was a consultant, need some sort of communication community to get together. So we enjoyed eating over there. But Bob's from Salisbury, North Carolina, and he and David were reminiscing there. Salisbury is Catawba. Fred Standback, there was a big meeting in Omaha this weekend. Fred Standback was one of good friend of Warren Buffett's and did very well with that stock a long time ago. And Food Town, which used to be Food, I guess it was Food Town, now it's Food Lion, is headquartered there. But just reading through his bio here, Bob is the longest tenured TV play-by-play announcer in Atlanta Hawks history. He's in his 27th year as the TV voice of the Hawks. The last 14 years, he's teamed with Dominique Wilkins, and he's won 13 Southeast Regional Emmy Awards, 8-time state honoree as Sportscaster of the Year from the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. He's been able to call games for TNT and NBA TV. He served as play-by-play announcer, and this was back, I guess, when I first met him, play-by-play announcer for the Braves for about 10 years. And preceding that, he was a announcer for the Tigers and Baltimore Orioles, so a big baseball background. He's also done football. Matter of fact, he might have done a football game just in the last year or so. So he knows all these sports. So it's not just sports, it's you get to know and be close to players in all 3 sports that he's been involved with. He's got a Bachelor of Arts degree in speech from Catawba College. He and his wife, Mary Beth, have 2 adult children, Court and Grace, and they're extensively involved in animal rescue efforts through Rescue Me GA. So please welcome Bob to our meeting.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here. Thanks for coming out at this rather early hour. You do this every Tuesday at 7 in the morning. Congratulations. It's so great to reunite with so many friends. Paul Roseman and I, you'll be interested to know, actually taught Sunday school here. I'm not quite sure how that got past the authorities, but we did, and it's great to see Paul and Michael and Bill and David and everybody. It's just great to have you all here. We need you back, by the way, big time. It's great to be back here and be with you all. This is I remember when this place was built, as many of you all do, and it's just with Wiley and Lyndon, what they did is just great. So I don't know what prompted me to do it, but when I was growing up in Salisbury, when I was 12 years old, I made a telephone call to the radio station in my hometown, WSTP. David, you might remember. And the announcer on duty, this is a Sunday afternoon, he answers the phone, and I introduced myself, I think, and I said, I really enjoy listening to your station because of all the sports that you have on. And he said, well, great. He said, if you're so interested, why don't you come down to the station and we'll give you a tour? And I said, great. So my mom and dad took me down to the radio station. And the second I walked in to that radio station, I said, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And this is what I want to do. And that began an every Sunday ritual for me where I would go hang out at this radio station. And one day, the sportscaster of the station showed up, and he said, well, young man, if you're so interested in sports and you love radio, why don't you help us broadcast these baseball games? And they were American Legion baseball games. And this is back in the mid to late 60s in North Carolina. And that was a time when minor league baseball had sort of died out. And American Legion baseball, which is basically high school ball in the summertime, took over to fill these little ballparks in all these mill towns like Salisbury and Kannapolis and Mooresville and Thomasville, Lexington. And we had a little league, and we had a very good team. For some reason, we had an amazing run that goes to this day. The coach that we had is a guy named Joe Farabee, who was a legendary, won more games in baseball than any coach in the history of North Carolina sports, high school, college, and Legion. And so we had a great team. There was great interest in the town. And so that's why the games were broadcast on the radio. Now, this seems like ancient times today, right? But back then, this was a big deal. And we had a great team. The ballpark, Newman Park, on the Catawba College campus where I went to school, hosted the games. And I'm keeping stats and getting the guy a Coke and a hot dog and not paying much attention. And he says, well, are you ready to make your debut? I said, well, I guess I am. And so I got the microphone in the bottom of the 7th inning of this American Legion baseball game. Now, these are high school kids playing in basically a minor league ballpark. So for them to hit a home run was like, it took something. I think this is a state championship team. They had 3 home runs in like 70 games. Never hit a home run. Of course, when I get the mic, our first baseman, Joey Brown, turns on one. Boom, it's over the fence, scoreboard, Coca-Cola sign, gone, goodbye, home run. I don't remember what I said. But when the announcer got the microphone back in the top of the 8th inning, he said, ladies and gentlemen, I have been waiting all season to call a home run. And when we hit one, I got some 12-year-old kid on the mic. And that's how it started for me. And I brought proof. This is me behind the backstop at Newman Park in Salisbury, North Carolina. This is in the summer of 1968. Perhaps you'll notice there's no microphone, no headset. I'm just talking. And whoever is listening. And we had a minor league team in 1968. The Washington Senators had an A club in Salisbury that set the all-time Western Carolina League record for most losses in a season. I didn't care. They let me come in and represent the radio station and quote unquote broadcast the games. But I was just sitting in front of the fence. But that's where it started for me back, 1,000 years ago in North Carolina, and fell in love with it from day one. Radio was great. As I talk to broadcast students, I always encourage them to start in radio or something like that these days, a podcast or something, and get the basics down before you branch off into TV. The guys who come into TV right away, I think, have it a little bit tougher. And I had a chance to do a lot of different sports over the years. Probably one of the strangest I ever did was arena football. In the summer of 1987, I had a chance to call these games. I got a phone call from ESPN, and they said, would you like to do this? And I said, well, sure. I'd never heard of it, but yeah, we'll give it a shot. And I thought it was going to be the end of my career. My partner was Lee Corso. You know Lee from College Game Day. So we are doing the first summer of arena football. Okay? There is no rule book. There is no rosters. There's no media guide. There is nothing. There was a guy who owned the league, a guy named Jim Foster. He had 5 teams, and they owned it all. And this is sort of the last stop for football players. And the turf that they played on in these arenas was about like this carpet here. It was harder than a rock. How these guys did it, I don't know. But our first game, we are in Chicago at the Horizon Arena. I don't know what they call it now. It's out by O'Hare. And they have this game between Denver and Chicago. Now, remember, Corso is doing a game with me. Okay, now this is the first game of the first season. This is the first touchdown. Okay, so the quarterback goes back to pass. This guy, his kid stretches out, makes a diving catch in the end zone, 50-yard field. First touchdown in arena football. And Corso says, we replay it, and Corso says, ladies and gentlemen, that was the greatest catch in the history of arena football. That was my boy Lee. So that I had a chance to do a ton of different games, but any kid growing up in North Carolina has a deep affiliation with ACC basketball. And growing up in Salisbury, it was, again, the luck. Thank you, Lord. The luck of being in the right place at the right time. Salisbury hosted the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. And they had an annual award where the top writer and top caster would come into Salisbury and get their awards. And the guy who was a restaurateur who thought it up was trying to promote his boxing matches. And he had all the writers and broadcasters going from Greensboro in April to Augusta to cover the Masters. And he said, well, why don't you guys just stay in Salisbury one night and we'll have this award ceremony. And so that's how it began as the host city. Well, the guy who won from Wyoming fell in love with Salisbury. Leo Morris was his name. And he ends up moving to Salisbury and working at the little radio station that I started at. And he was doing the sports, but he also did Wake Forest and Duke. Okay? He predated Bob Harris. Bob Harris took over for Leo. My Duke man, Mr. Vogel, knows all things Duke. So I would keep stats for Leo, and that got me going into the ACC. And this coming up will be my 36th year of calling ACC basketball, and have loved it every second. If anybody, I don't know why they would, but if anybody ever asks you, who's the greatest player in the history of the ACC? You tell them it's this man right here, David Thompson from NC State. Open and shut. I don't care. Ralph Sampson, Michael Jordan, Christian Laettner. No, this man was the greatest player in the history of the ACC. It's hard to explain today what it was like back then. Now, some of you guys obviously can remember 1974, but there was no open NCAA tournament. Only the conference champion could go to the NCAA tournament. Now, that seems crazy now, right? With 68 teams and March Madness and fun. But back then, only the conference champion could make it. And this particular year, 2 of the top 3 teams in the country were in the ACC. NC State, this is the 74 championship game. They're playing Maryland, back when Maryland was in the ACC. They met in the championship game in Greensboro on that Saturday night, and NC State ended up winning in overtime, 103-100, the greatest game in ACC basketball history, and your boy was there that night. I was a sophomore in college. We were keeping stats on the Duke network. We all broadcast, every network broadcast every game. And it was the most electric atmosphere I think I've ever been to at a basketball game, because the loser knew they were out and the winner was going to go on in the NCAA tournament. Maryland was so devastated that they turned down a postseason bid to the NIT that year. Lefty Driesell was the coach, and they did not go to the postseason. They had the 3rd best team in the country. The other team in that top 3 was UCLA, and that's a team NC State defeated in the national semifinals on their way to winning the championship. But that was back. This, to me, it's kind of like you all have some memories of what happened in your past. This, to me, is like happened yesterday. It was an unbelievable. There's nothing today that approximates this in terms of importance and drama and meaning. It was great. Since 1996, I have broadcast the Atlanta Hawks games, and anyone who comes to a men's meeting wearing a Hawks jersey, look at the You go, I don't care what you do, you go straight to heaven. But since 1996, I have called the Atlanta Hawks games, and my partner the last 14 years has been Dominique Wilkins. And you all may remember this young man from the University of Georgia. Nick grew up in Washington, North Carolina, eastern part of the state. Went to Georgia. Everybody thought he was going to go to NC State and replace David Thompson, but he didn't. And Nick has been my partner ever since. He started doing the TV work 14 years ago. But this is Nick. You may remember him a little bit more for this than playing at UGA. One of the things about Nick, who got the nickname the Human Highlight Film, was people today haven't seen him play. He hadn't played in 30 years. They don't remember how hard he played every night. There was no load management with Dominique Wilkins. We played every game, and we played it all night to the max. And I wish he would be more remembered for how hard he played. Obviously, he was a Hall of Fame player and just the greatest player we've ever had in our franchise. But he was something else. You guys remember Nick. I mean, I don't need to tell you all about Dominique Wilkins, but he's so much fun to be with, the stories and being together. And this is what we do every night. This is us. We're getting ready to broadcast a Hawks game last season, and we have great fun together. And I hope you all enjoy the games on TV as much as we do. I wanted to talk a little bit about television because it's changing. So I always like to do a little market research when I'm on the road and when I'm here with guys like you all. So how many in the audience still have cable or satellite? Show of hands. About half the room. Okay, interesting. Because this is causing our business a lot of turmoil, to put it mildly. As people give up their cable subscriptions, it makes companies like mine at Valley and all regional networks, all cable industry, kind of shudder a little bit. I saw Dish just lost 500,000 subscribers over the past quarter. That's a lot of folks giving up cable, satellite, etc. But the way that we do sports is also changing. But you know, if you go to a Braves game, you go to a Hawks game, college football, basketball, whatever, the setup is basically the same. You'll see these humongous cameras covering the action on the field, everything in HD, et cetera. Everything's digital now. If you walk behind Truist Park or, Turner Field in the old days, or, if you go to Athens or Georgia Tech or whatever, and you see these humongous trucks, we sort of do it basically the same way today as we've done the last 20, 30 years. These are called production trucks. And I'm going to get my little pointer here. Yeah, there it goes. These are production trucks. And we haul these things in, these little 18-wheeler, they're big 18-wheelers, and they park at the stadium. And then out of that comes all the cable wiring for the audio and the video, the cameras and the mics and all that stuff. And then this is what it looks like inside that truck. And basically the setup is the same everywhere that we go. In what they call the front bench, which is these folks up here, okay, this is the bank of everything they've got going. And this happens to be a golf tournament, but the setup's the same. This is every camera, every tape machine, everything that they have at their disposal to put on the air. And there's generally 3 people at the front. On the left is the producer of the telecast. And that person, male or female, and I have a female producer for the Hawks, Jill Gossett-Cook, that person is in charge of the telecast, the look, the sound, the feel, everything, the format of the program. That's all coming from the producer here. This person here is the director. This is the person that calls the shots. They'll look at all the cameras, all the taped elements, everything that's good, all the different stuff that you see out of the front of your screen. This guy will call it. He'll say stuff like you probably heard, ready one, take one. And he's telling this gentleman, who's the technical director over here, which button to push. So the technical director actually mashes the button and take one, he hits camera one and camera one goes out over the air. And it works like this generally in every telecast these days. Now, in the back of the truck looks something like this, and this is where the rest of the broadcast takes place in terms of replays, graphics, audio, all that. That goes on in the back of the truck. It doesn't look nearly this nice all the time, but that's how it works in the back end of that 18-wheeler that I showed you. Now, when we get to the broadcast, this is what it looks like to the camera. This is what you see at home. Everybody looks nice. We have a nice background. You know, everybody looks good. Ties are straight. And that's what it looks like to you at home. But this is what it looks like in the chaos of being on the air. You've got your broadcast booth. You got people next door. You got all your notes in front of you. The field's out here somewhere. And they're getting ready to broadcast this football game. And it really is organized chaos. And speaking of Lee Corso, I wanted to share a story with you about what happens on live television. Anybody know who that is? Ralphie the Buffalo, the mascot of the Colorado Buffaloes. So Corso and I are doing a college game on ESPN. It's Nebraska, Colorado, which is a pretty big game. It was Thanksgiving weekend. And we do our little stand-up, which is what they call that when you're standing up in front of the camera. And old Ralphie's down in his pen, waiting to go on the field to lead the Buffaloes out, and the team follows him out. Well, for this setup at Boulder, to do the on camera, we have our backs to the field, okay? So I got a bright light on my face, and Corso is doing his thing. And the producer is in my ear. We have a little earpiece. Producer's in my ear. It's time for Ralphie to come out, okay? But Ralphie's not coming out. So I get a little message in my earpiece. Keep talking. Okay, well, Lee, you know, this really is a big game today. Nebraska's won 4 in a row and blah, 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 blah. Well, Ralphie's not coming out of his pen. Now, you see the camera guy, okay, here. On that camera, see that thing right there, that microphone? Can you guys see that? Okay, so they've opened up that mic into my ear. Now, I can't see, my back's to the field, okay? I got the bright light on my face, but I can hear. They've opened up this microphone, and I can hear what's going on, and I sense that Ralphie's not cooperating. Ralphie's not in a good mood. Maybe it was a 7 a.m. breakfast or something, but Ralphie wasn't in a great mood. So I can hear all this, and the next voice I hear is from that pen, and one of the guys down there says, "I'll get him out." And the next thing I hear is his little starter's pistol. Boom. Well, Ralphie came out, he came out all right. So we go off camera and I turn around and I look at the field, okay? Now, Ralphie is down at one end zone. And you see these gentlemen that his handlers. At the other end of the field is the Colorado marching band with their backs to Ralphie. Yeah, here comes Ralphie. So I turn around and Ralphie's I mentioned earlier, he's not in a very good mood. So he comes roaring out onto the field. So much so that these guys, this was not the actual picture from that day, but these cats who've got the tether lines and the whole 9 yards for this beast who's coming out of this pen, and he is ticked off. They've just fired a gun in his ear, and he is snorting coming out of there. And I see Ralphie coming this way, and I see the band down here. And the band is pointing this way. They don't know Ralphie is making a beeline. Now, this is the crazy stuff that goes through your head when you're on national television. How am I going to describe death on national television? Because Ralphie is about ready to take out the tuba player. All I can see is Dan Rather, CBS News. University of Colorado sophomore Joe Blow murdered at the 40-yard line today when Ralphie the Buffalo ran him over pregame. Here's how it sounded on ESPN. And I'm thinking, what am I going to say? Well, thank goodness these cats right here saved the day. And they start taking those ropes and they start wrapping it around their arm. And like the lead guy, like this cat right here, he just drops. Now, this is AstroTurf at that time at Boulder. He just drops on the turf. And old Ralphie goes, and down he goes. And that's the only way they could stop him. And we show it, and then we go to commercial, like nothing happened. And the sweat is coming down, and I am white as a ghost. And I'm thinking, there's got to be maybe a different way to make a living than this. I'm often asked about the Hawks and what was the greatest moment? What was the greatest game? What's the greatest call you ever made? I answer it by talking about the 60-win team. You guys remember 14-15, as special a year as we have ever had. We won 19 straight games. We were ahead in the East by 10 games on March the 1st, which is unheard of. Went 60-22. 4 of the guys were on the All-Star team. The month of January, 5 starters were named the player of the month. I mean, it was truly a team. And I think that was what made it so special, was that we were able to win a lot of games, but we did it the right way. We shared the ball. Everybody was in. Had we stayed healthy, I really think we were going to go to the NBA Finals. I think we would have beaten Cleveland. But as we went through March and April, we started losing guys to injury. One inflicted by the NYPD on one of our players, Thabo Cephalosha. They took batting practice on his shin, which was not a good thing. He won his lawsuit, got $10 million in cash, but it cost us the playoffs. But this is a great team, and it was essentially the teamwork. And for a team, for a business, for a church, doesn't matter. You know, you've got to have everybody, when they walk through that door, everybody has to be pulling in the same direction. The only thoughts you can have is that of team success. The individual glory will come. These guys, especially the players, are all well compensated. They're well paid. But in pro sports and in college and high school too, every focus every day has to be on what can I do to make this team better? And it might not be planned. Now I know you guys were not up at 1 a.m. last night watching the Lakers. Were you? One was, if I say Lonnie Walker, does that mean anything to you? The Laker game last night, they're playing Golden State. It's coming down to the wire. They go to the fourth quarter. Golden State's got a lead, had a pretty big lead early in the fourth quarter. And the Lakers put a guy in the game named Lonnie Walker, the fourth. His new nickname is Lonnie Walker, the fourth quarter, because he went off last night. He had 15 in the fourth quarter, and the Lakers came from behind and beat Golden State to go up 3-1. When the Lakers redid their team, Lonnie Walker got shuffled to the back, and he was out of the rotation, wasn't playing, and hadn't played the whole playoffs until last night when they needed him, and he got hot. And he was able to do that because he stayed ready. He was part of the team. My job right now is to be a cheerleader on the bench, but I'm going to stay ready just in case my number is called. He did that last night. He responded. The Lakers are 1 win away from the conference final. But again, it's the team. It's putting your personal goals aside for the betterment of the team. And you'll hear more about that today as they talk about last night's game. But it was an incredible performance last night. Okay, grandkids and children. Okay. I speak to a ton of high school, college students. I'll give you all the advice that I share with them. If you want 2 skills that's going to carry you for the rest of your life, learn how to speak well and learn how to write well. If you can do those 2 things, the chances of being successful in this business environment in 2020, 23 and beyond is enormous. When I say speak well, I don't mean this. Although that would be nice if you can get up in front of a group of people and talk. That's terrific. But I'm talking more about, can you carry on a conversation with an adult? Can you impact somebody with your words? Can you be a great listener? That's a huge part of speaking. If you'll work on that and then also learn how to write, I would encourage everybody's kids, grandkids, yourself, if you don't have them, get your own website. Take your name, secure it as, and make that your own, and write a blog. Have the discipline to write daily. And the payoff is enormous. Again, it's the art of communication. As Bill mentioned in my introduction, I was a speech major at Catawba, and it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. The head of the department was basically my teacher. Carl Hales, Dr. Hales was, when I went to school, he said, Bob, he said, we don't get many guys like you. You know what you want to do. Let's just clear out a path so you can do what you want to do, and we'll help you get ready. And isn't that what college is supposed to be all about? Right? Especially with what everybody's paying these days. To get that kind of training. And I had it great because I was working full-time and going to school full-time. So whatever I learned in the classroom at Catawba, I got immediately had the chance to put it into practice, which is just great. And that's what I encourage my broadcast students to do. One of the reasons why writing and speaking is so important, because this thing in her right hand, the technology, to me as a broadcaster, is a blessing and a curse. Yeah, it's great to have the communication and being able to instantaneously see anything in the world that happens. But the downside is it's so addicting. Social media, I mean, you'll have to have another speaker come in and tell you the pros and cons of that. But I do know this thing has affected the college and high school students that I talk to enormously. And I think the best advice is just to maybe turn it off for 5 minutes and just work on your skills as a speaker and as a writer. That'll help you more in business than how many likes you get on Instagram. So I just wanted to say thanks and open it up. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them and set you out on your day. Favorite? You know, I did a lot of baseball. So I enjoy it. I'm glad they're getting back to baseball this year, you know, without having 16 guys on the right side of the diamond for a shift. And I'm glad that it's getting back to baseball, base stealing and hitting and running and all that. But I've enjoyed them all. I really have. I've had a chance to call so many different sports, you know, when I was with CBS and ESPN, and just do all kinds of, I did tennis and golf and all this stuff. So I've enjoyed them all, but probably spent more time with basketball and baseball the most. Enjoyed my time with the Braves immensely. Yes, Mr. Vogel. Yeah, preparation for a Hawks game is, there's two kinds, actually. There's the ongoing 365 days a year where if you see something, you grab it and throw it in a file for next season. But then the daily prep, which is what you're talking about, starts around this time in the morning and goes till about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and then off to the game. It takes me about 8 to 10 hours to get ready for a broadcast. It's sort of like getting ready for a final exam. If we remember those days, you know, wait till the night before. No, I'm just kidding. But you have to, there's so many games, there's so many players, we travel so much that it's just daily. There's no, like, you might not play a game that day, but it's not an off day. You know, you're still grinding. And you got to know the teams, the coaches, the stories of the game. Then you got to know the rules of the game, which is very important. And then you got to know the TV end of it. My responsibilities is for the broadcast that night. So it's a full day, but it beats working, you know. I couldn't get a job. This is it. This is it. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Oh, all the time. And just playing Boston in the playoffs brought it all back. The Neek Bird shootout in Game 7 in '88, when Neek went for 47, was a classic NBA playoff moment that is still talked about to this day. We brought it all back, and he just, they lost by 1 point. Doc Rivers was the point guard, and Doc set the all-time Hawks playoff record for assists in that game with 22. And Doc said, I just threw the ball to Neek. That's how I got that record. And it was an amazing display. What people I think have forgotten about that series is the Hawks were up 3-2. This is a great Boston team. The '86 Celtics were considered the greatest NBA team of all time. This is 2 years later, and they still had that group of Bird and McHale and Parrish and those guys. And so the Hawks were up 3-2, had Game 6 at the Omni, and lost. Cliff Livingston with his ill-fated hook shot. And we lost Game 6 and then had to go to Boston for Game 7 and then the shootout. And they just traded haymakers. It was fantastic. If you ever have a chance, like on YouTube or something, you want to go watch it. It is 12 minutes of basketball that will take your breath away. How they just kept making shot after shot after shot. It was great. Somebody else have a question?
So back to the preparation. Your preparation is people. Some random person gets hot and you know their life story. Talking about just random stats.
Right. No, it's coming from me. The game happens too fast for that to happen. Now if we were taping the game and playing it back later and had a chance to edit all that, that might come into play. But live, it happens too fast. I've got it all in front of me. And, I've done it for so long that I kind of know where everything is to look for if a record pops up or something like that. But yeah, you just have to kind of get ready for, the history of the players, the history of the team, what's happened lately, what's going on in the playoff series, for example, all of those things. You kind of have it handy and ready. I make a new sheet for every game. So I don't really start from scratch, but every game has its own unique twist. There is no such thing as, like in the playoffs, there's no such thing as momentum. There's no such thing as what happened the last game is going to impact this game. It's too crazy. So you got to start with a fresh mindset, fresh eyes to get ready for that specific game. But it's fun. That's the thing about it. I love it. I'm going to, when I leave here, I'm going to go change, but I'm going to go over to the practice facility. We're bringing in 6 more college guys for the draft today. We had 6 yesterday. We'll have 6 today, 6 tomorrow, 6 on Thursday. And I love it. I remember the quote from Don Shula, the great football coach. The closer I get to the stadium, the faster I walk. And that really sums it up for me. I cannot wait to get to the arena. I cannot wait to get to Cameron Indoor Stadium for that game. Now, this is fun. This is great. And, go to a game for nothing and they give you a plane ticket and a hotel. Nice. Nice. I love it. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. That means so much. I know. I feel the same way. I'm like, what am I going to do now? Yes, ma'am. Mhm. Right. Mhm. Mhm.
That being that he's great himself, but we need
Yeah.
the rest of the deck. Now that you've had a chance to reflect on the season, what do you see happening with the Hawks where we can take it that next step and go keep it? What do you think's gonna happen?
The first thing that has to happen as we change, many of you are aware, we change GMs and coach in mid-season. So one of the first things that has to happen, and this is going on as we speak, is the exhale from the season where these guys can actually sit down for the first time and think about these questions that Mark posed in that column and you're asking this morning. Between what did Quinn see? What would he like to change? Who does he think should be with us going forward? What does Landry think? Because he's just in that chair for the last 4 months, 5 months. What does he see? We have to hire a completely new basketball staff. All the old coaches got blown out. Medical team got blown out. So that's going on. The draft preparation. And then probably by the end of May, we'll get around to the questions that you're asking, which is, not that they don't think about them already, but there's sort of a sequential order here. How do we make this work with Trey? He's not going to get any bigger. Okay. He's always going to be, in the big games, a defensive liability because of his size. Any team that plays the Hawks knows this is their best player. This is a guy that we can isolate in a pick and roll, or we could go one-on-one against him. How do we then build a team if he's going to stay? And that question has to be asked too. If he's going to stay, how do we then build a team around that? That you can have like that 60-win team that all came together at both ends of the floor. Do we have the right people now? So this is the soul searching that they've got to do. And these are tough questions because we are going to be in the luxury tax next year with our top 8 players. We still got to get 7 more. And we're going to be in the luxury tax already. So as you build the team out, Quinn, what do you think? You saw 20 games worth. Should we keep this guy, keep that guy, trade this guy, or keep this guy? Those are the questions that they're trying to answer right now. And it was so great for Quinn to be able to see it. The wins, the losses, the locker room, the team on the road, have a chance to see all that and say, okay, I like this. I don't like this. This needs to change. We can work with this. And that's how we go forward. But this is not something that you just, the season's over. Okay, now what? They've got a lot to do before they get to that point. But those questions are key. And these next couple of months are going to tell the story. Once we get through the draft, free agency opens and trading begins, then you'll see what the product of their thinking will be. I don't know. I'm not privy to that, but I'm pretty close to Quinn. Now he would tell me if I asked him, but I try to stay in my lane. But they got some hard questions to ask. They really do, because right now we're a 500 ball club, and that's not going to cut it. We're just kind of good enough to get through, and that's not going to cut it. On what? I'm sorry. Oh, it's awful. It's okay. I was asked about NIL. Pro sports was always the carrot that drove college guys. I'll give you an example. Drew Timme from Gonzaga had a chance to come out. We had him at camp last summer. Big kid, player of the year candidate, really good Gonzaga team. He's a really good college player. He had a chance to come to the pros. I think he was a senior. He's a fifth year this year, so he was a 4-year senior last year. And he went to the workouts for all the teams, went to the combine, and they told him, you know, you're like fringe guy, maybe first round, probably second. He said, well, I'll just go back to school and make $1 million. He'll make more in college than he would as a pro. What? How crazy is that? I would like to know, I would like to know, what does it cost Georgia football on an annual basis to fund NIL? Forget about the operational costs of the team. How many millions are they spending to organize NIL for that championship team? Not right or wrong, it's just, that's a lot of money that used to go to scholarships, and the donors used to go and deposit that money for the facilities or the new chemistry lab. You know, now all that cash is getting redirected into NIL. And now that it's state by state, but many states have it now in high school. I just don't, I don't know. I'm wrestling with this one because we see it at the back end in the pros. And what we see in the NBA is load management, taking games off, guaranteed contracts, we lost tonight, but there's another game tomorrow. You know, that whole mindset of competition is changing. For better or worse, not really sure. It's maybe too early, but I don't like what I see. I'm just not a fan of it. Just because it's popular to say today it's a good thing, I think the long-term impact might not be what we thought it was going to be. And I'll leave it at that. Oh boy. I will say that I don't know if it's one guy. I think there's a group of guys. But the skill level at the NBA level is off the chart. We have never seen guys do the things that they're doing now in the history of basketball. Jokic, Giannis, Embiid, Steph, you go right on down the line. I mean, these guys are otherworldly players. And to pick one, be hard pressed to do that. But I love Jokic for Denver. I love him. I mean, he looks like a guy that, you know, came off the loading dock. You know, they gave him a uniform, and he had 53 the other night. And he's about as unathletic as I am. It appears that way. He's not, but he's amazing. You know, Giannis, they call him the Greek freak for a reason. You know, he can take like 3 strides and go from half court to dunking the ball. It's unbelievable what these guys can do. Steph Curry revolutionized shooting. And he looks like a kid that'll go mow your lawn on Saturday afternoon. It's amazing. The skill level is off the chart. Yes. I'll take the Atlanta Hawks. Did you? Are my bosses online? Now I'll take the Hawks. You know, I've done network. I did a lot with ESPN and CBS and over the years, and I like being with the team. I like the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and getting to know the guys and the coaches. I prefer that. I really do. When you do a network game, you just parachute in and you do the game, and then one team wins, one team loses. You don't win or lose. You just go back to the hotel and fly home. but I miss that. I miss the locker room. I like the competition, you know. As funny as it sounds, I like the pain when you lose. I love walking out of Boston winning Game 5. Watching 19,000 people go was awesome. Tremendous. I wish we could have stuck it to them again. That it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I-
Yes.
So it's clear you're enthusiastic and love what you do. I'm just curious, was there ever a time where maybe there was a time or a season where it wasn't that much fun, where you were not, we could probably all relate to that in our jobs, you have seasons you go through where it's not.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Everything's so-
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you're losing, you know, we've had some scorched earth seasons, you know. We know what the Braves have been through and the Falcons, you know, and that's all part of it. But, you know, once we sit down and broadcast the game, you know, this is the candy store of life, you know, and that's why I get so upset with players who, you know, moan and groan about whatever. I'm not playing enough, or we're not winning enough, or I don't like that coach. I said, you know, shut up. Shut up. You're playing basketball for a living. If you want to see some load management, come with me to Northside High School hospital. We'll go to the ICU unit and we'll look at these nurses and doctors who are working 12 hours, 15 straight hours, with somebody's life hanging on the line. Then we'll talk about load management. But this is not load management. You're 25 years old. You're in the best shape of your life. You're asked to play 30 minutes of real time on a basketball court. Shut up. Just shut up. I will now get off my soapbox.
Well, the union is the best at what you do.
A broadcaster? Oh, boy. Well, you know, I mentioned, I was so lucky as a kid growing up. I mentioned that National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. Well, all the guys would come in, and ladies later, they would all come in for the awards. And I was, when I got my driver's license at 16, I was on the transportation committee, which meant, hey, get this car, go to the Charlotte airport and pick up A, B, C, and D and bring them back to Salisbury. Well, in the back seat of my car for 45 minutes for that ride from Douglas Airport to Salisbury, I had Kurt Gowdy, Lindsey Nelson, Keith Jackson, Howard Cosell, the giants, the titans of broadcasting in the back seat of the car. And I had them for 45 minutes. And I said to Lindsey Nelson, I said, Mr. Nelson, I want to do what you do one day. Do you have any advice? And Lindsey said, now I got to explain. You all know who Lindsey Nelson is. Remember how he dressed on the air? It looked like a sport coat was like a 57 Chevy seat cover. And it was just crazy. I said, Mr. Nelson, do you have any advice? He said, Robert, if you don't have any talent, dress funny. But I had all these guys in the back of the car, and they were so giving. And so I had a chance to learn, you know, from the best. And just to dovetail on that story I told when I was 12 and called the home run, that announcer was Marty Brenneman, who went on to a Hall of Fame career with Cincinnati Reds. He was just starting out. He was just a kid, almost out of college, just starting his career. So I had a chance to, you know, I mean, Marty was awesome, right? But he was Marty. We really didn't really think much about it. But this guy's one of the all-time great broadcasters in our little radio station. So I had so many great mentors coming up. It's hard to really pick one because I incredibly had access to all of them. And they all had a little something different, you know, to add to the mosaic.
I had a question online.
Yes,
Online.
your voices.
I'm online. I had a question online.
We'll let you.
I lived in Boston under Johnny Most, and then I lived in Pittsburgh under Myron Cope. Is there going to be an announcer like those guys again, type of thing?
Maybe, times have changed. The evolution of television has changed that. Guys like Johnny Most, were on the radio when the games weren't televised, and you had to kind of take his word for it. And if you knew Johnny, he saw things one way, and that was for the Celtics. And everybody else was the villain. It's a little harder to do that these days because every game's televised. You can see it for yourself. So I don't know that particular style will come back. It may, but I tend to doubt it because of the influence of television. Yes. Yes. I think Danny Ferry is one of the greatest college players I ever had a chance to broadcast. He and Quinn were roommates at Duke for 4 years, and he was a phenomenal college player. As an administrator, I thought he did a lot of great things for us. I think it's a shame that he got blackballed like he did. And and yet Adam Silver, the commissioner, is a Duke guy too. And Duke guys everywhere. Talk to Mr. Vogel later. But even Adam is trying to get him back. And he's paid the price for that. But I think he's got a keen eye for talent, no doubt. Well, he hired Bud. So how long ago was that? 10 years, 15? Let's see, Bud was here 5. And then Woody was here 6, so 15, maybe 15 years. Yeah, but good man. I stay in touch with him. Yes. Yeah, I really don't. And I'll tell you why. Again, it goes back to those early days in Salisbury. I would ask these guys, do you have to have a signature home run call? Like Marty developed one just out of thin air. When he got the Cincinnati job, they won a game. One night, he just blurted out, "This one belongs to the Reds." He didn't think about it. It just came out, and that, turned out to be his signature. All the great home run calls have been taken. You're not going to reinvent the wheel. And guys try, I think it comes off a little hokey, the guy that I worked with in Detroit, who I love like a brother, Rick Riz, but his was goodbye baseball. Well, like the Tigers, the year that we did the game, one of the years we did the games together, the Tigers hit like 275 home runs, and every home run's goodbye baseball. But every home run's not the same. One's a home run when you're down 10-1. One's a home run that wins the game in the bottom of the 9th. It's a little different. So when you have a call, a signature call, and you got to use it all the time, to me, it lessens its impact. So no, I don't have one. There are some things that I probably routinely say, but I really don't have a signature call because those guys discourage me from doing it.
Bob, what's your take on the focus of faith in pro sports these days as compared to when you started?
Well, again, I go back to television. When I was broadcasting those American Legion games back in the late 60s and early 70s, and when I took over, like in 1973, my best buddy, who I went to high school with, Charles Swanson, now an attorney in Knoxville, Tennessee. I feel safe when I'm in Knoxville. But Charles would keep stats for me. And for us to be able to get the score of an out-of-town game, he would listen to the Braves on WSB. We're in North Carolina. And when Ernie and Milo and those guys would announce a score, he'd write it down and hand it to me. Phillies 4, Dodgers 2, bottom of the 6th. That's how we got our out-of-town scores. I can go back to that same ballpark today, and on my phone, I can watch the game. So that's how times have changed. And there was always a mysticism about Major League Sports because you couldn't see it. You had to listen to it on the radio, or you had to read about it in the newspaper, okay? And these athletes of a bygone era became legends, you know, Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, you know, Bill Russell, whoever it was that played in the pre-television era, just were bigger than life. And we all had a reverence for that. But now, after 30 years of TV, every game's on. Everybody's talking about it. It just seems like the allure of I should say the magic of pro sports has changed. Because now everybody's whining and complaining about the money or the season's too long. Dude, they were playing 162 games 50 years ago. That changed, but it's our perception through television that has changed our view. And the explosion of sports media, everybody's got a talk show, everybody's got a podcast, everybody's got an opinion, and it's just 24/7. You turn your phone off, you turn your TV off, they're still talking. And that's changed I think, our perception of the game. My opinion. It's just nearly not as magical as it used to be.
Today's culture, cancel culture, everything you say gets retweeted, rebroadcast, commented on, attention. Do you find yourself being more careful with some of the things that you say, or not that you really enjoy,
Right.
even little things get blown up of proportion?
Right. Yeah, I do. I'm very aware. When I stick the knife in the Celtic fans, I know what I'm doing. But it's again, I go back to the training that I got. And I'm so thankful, and it's something that I'd love to impart to the broadcast. It means something to hold this microphone. You know, back in the day, radio and TV stations were granted a license by the Federal Communications Commission to serve as a public trust to be on the air. When I worked at WSTP, to turn that transmitter on, I had to have a first-class FCC radio license. All it was is flipping a switch to turn on the transmitter, but I had to have a license to do that because they wanted people who worked in the industry to have a respect for what it was you're about to do. And when you turn on that microphone, and I talk to my Hawks fans every night, I have an obligation to be well prepared and informed. And television, I can't fake it. You see the game just as well as I see the game. So I think I don't really worry about that because I was so drilled in the respect aspect of what we do with a mic that I don't have to worry about that. But as this thing has evolved, and let's face it, anybody with a laptop and a microphone and an internet connection is a broadcaster. Well, no. You're not a broadcaster. You have a mic and a laptop and an internet connection. But there's no filter anymore. Anybody can get on and say anything. That's not, to me, that's not good. That is not a good thing. And I think that's where a lot of broadcasters get in trouble. And they lay in the weeds for you. You know, there are websites like Awful Announcing and all these different ones. They tape the games. They are waiting for you to screw up so they can make a name for themselves. So you do have to be careful. And but I don't go on the air and think, oh, I better, because I've been trained, you know, you just don't go there. But that's not true of all of them. But yeah, it's a different time. If I didn't feel like I had to use social media to promote the telecasts and talk to Hawks fans, I would walk out of this church and I would suspend every account I have ever had in social media. And I would be the happiest guy in Georgia. It just doesn't, I do it for the fans. Just again, the soapbox. Sorry. Any other questions? Right, yeah. Well, thank you, but I'm not sure that I do. I think anybody that tunes into our game knows I'm calling the Hawks, because my audience is 95% Hawks. They don't really much care about Boston. That guy from New England still on? Celtics stink. But I'm not like, and I think it's a good thing of having Nick with me, because he calls it right down the middle. This is the greatest player we've ever had in our franchise. And he goes out of his way to say, that was a good play. We stunk on that one. He recognizes the opponent. So again, it's television. You can see it like I can see it. The crazy thing about what I do is I am broadcasting and describing something that you can see for yourself. The analyst, whoever it is going to show you and explain to you something you did not see. That's the value of replay. How many times are you watching a football game and there's this chaos of the play, and then they throw a long pass or what have you, or the guy gets open, and then they replay it. And then the analyst says, now watch the left guard, and they'll circle him as he pulls to the right and as the lead block, and then the fullback comes through. You didn't quite catch it live, but you see it on the replay. And that's the essence of what we do. Radio, you can say whatever you want.
So as someone who speaks for a living, what advice do you have for preachers like some of us?
Tell stories.
Keep it short.
Yeah. We have a hard off time. The 11 o'clock news is coming on. You got to get off the air. No, I would say I've got every stat. I've got everything you can have to broadcast a game. The only thing people remember are the stories, the energy, the positivity. That I would say that to any public speaker. They're not going to remember numbers. I didn't put any numbers up here. They're all, how many PowerPoints have you sat through with, right? I hear some guys chuckling. And then they read what's up there. Oh, no, that's not speaking. You want to get to their hearts, and the way to connect is through the great story. How can I relate today's message through a story? That Bible was written thousands of years ago, but it's applicable today because of the stories that are in it and the lessons. The good lessons do this, and the bad lessons don't do this. And how can you tell that story Sunday after Sunday after Sunday and keep it fresh? That's if the good Lord blessed me with one thing, it was enthusiasm for tomorrow's game. I cannot wait. This is the worst time of the year for me. When is the schedule coming out? When do I get back? And that enthusiasm to meet today's needs with old stories, you got it. Yes, Mr. Calder. Yes. Yes. I'm a family man when they need money.
Yeah. Dedicated mom, you have 2 kids. Does she get to enjoy and travel more with you now? And then just on the kids, I can picture it for maybe 20 years ago, you get to do a brief play-by-play down at the Hawks. And
Right.
In broadcasting now, but did he ever have a desire over your
Yeah, no, he really didn't. Both kids went to High Point. He never really was a big enough sports fan. He enjoys it, but not that much. But his fascination has been with the air, and he's going to be a commercial pilot here in the next week, we hope. He's got one more test, and he's on his way. And Gracie went to High Point as an accounting major, but they grew up here. And Mary Beth, as Bill mentioned, and thank you for mentioning that, Rescue Me Georgia. They've saved over 6,000 animals, finding fosters and adopters for dogs, mainly down south, but really all over the state, with her network of fosters and helpers and what have you. So she's in that. You talk about 24/7, 365, getting the rescue business. Holy moly. How many dogs do we have? Too many. There may be some DeKalb County authorities in the audience checking on me. And so we don't talk about that. Bill, we don't talk about that. No, we have quite a few. We have quite a few. Right. Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's move it, today. Here that we're so grateful for this time to come together, so grateful for us. Blessing us this morning with his presence, his stories, his enthusiasm. Thank you for where you have gifted and guided. We ask you to continue to report and strengthen. We just thank you, Lord, for our church community, living, good city. Lord, help each of us this day and the days forward. Truly be your hands and feet, and with such inspired lives, with such witness that we represent this morning. We thank you for all this. We say blessing to your name. Amen.